Hey alumni, welcome to InterVarsity World Changers, the podcast celebrating God's world-changing work in and through InterVarsity alumni like you. I'm your host, John Steele, and our guest on this episode of World Changers is a well-known hip-hop artist and producer. He's known for tracks like You Can't Stop Me, Coming in Hot, which went digital platinum in 2023, the very recent Red Room Freestyle, and Crazy, which we have the privilege of using as the theme song for this podcast. I'm sure you already know by now exactly who I'm talking about. Our guest today is City College of New York alumnus Andy Mineo, and Andy is changing the world as a talented artist, musician, and entrepreneur. He's navigating the modern music industry while thoughtfully engaging with other artists who walk in the same circles and with the broader culture as a follower of Jesus. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy Andy's story. Andy, welcome to the podcast, man.
What's up, dude?
I'm so glad that you're here. So this is your first time joining me for an episode like this, but Andy, you've been a part of this podcast from the beginning.
That's right.
That's right. Your song Crazy is our intro and outro music for every episode for the last year plus here. I really appreciate you letting us use such a great song as from the beginning of this thing. It's been super awesome to have you on board in that way.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer for me. I mean, InterVarsity is the home team, so I always, whenever you guys need, down.
That's awesome. I love that. Andy, you probably get introduced in all sorts of different ways, and people calling out the things that they think are probably most important for others to know. I'd love to create a space for you to introduce yourself. Would you do me the honor of introducing yourself for our guests who are joining us, who are listening in later on, and just help us get to know you a little bit before we jump into our conversation?
Yeah, you know what? This is funny. So I used to get asked all the time to do, like if I did an event, right? They'd say, hey, how do you want us to announce you?
Yeah.
And so obviously, like, I don't know what to write. I'm like, anything you want, I don't care. But it got asked so many times that we actually created a thing to send to people.
Okay.
And it's completely self-deprecating, which is
that's awesome.
Hilarious. And I'm seeing if I could find it to read it for you because it's that good. If not, I got to find it for you and send it over afterwards so you can put it in the front of the episode. It's like Andy, the Prince of Pickleball. He's followed on the internet by some very famous people who refuse to respond to him in the DMs. A kid, I'm from Syracuse, New York. I grew up there, lived in New York City all my 20s.
Nice.
And I make music for a living.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I make music and I have a good time, and seeing how long I can do this without having to get a real job.
Keep it going, man. You and me both. You and me both. I'm sitting in I'm podcasting for a living right now. So, how long can we keep this up really?
I don't know. AI is taking over soon here.
That's true.
They're going to be doing better pods than us here soon.
That's all right. Until they take over, we'll keep doing what we're doing.
That's right.
Man, and am I crazy, or did you also just like recently or in the very near future be celebrating your 10-year anniversary?
Yeah, we just had 10-year anniversary, me and my wife, and then we got our first baby on the way. So
that is so exciting. I heard about that too. How are you feeling about that baby on the way?
Feel pretty good. I said the cardinal sin, which is you can't say that you're ready to have a kid, but I feel like I'm ready to have a kid.
All right.
And my friend asked me to say, why you feel ready? I said, well, I think I'm prepared to be sleepless, sexless, moneyless, and unappreciated. And he was like, you truly are ready to have a kid. I was like, all right, let's do it.
There you go, man. There you go. You're ready in all the right ways. You're ready. Well, congratulations on the 10 years. Congratulations on a baby on the way. That's exciting stuff. And man, another interesting thing that people might not know about you super clearly is that you're also an InterVarsity alum. Like InterVarsity is part of your history. Can you just give us a quick rundown of like how did you meet InterVarsity in the first place? Do you have like a standout memory of your time on campus with InterVarsity?
Yeah, so I went to New York City to go to school. I went to the City College of New York, and there was an InterVarsity chapter there. And I think maybe I was just I I was living in the dorms and some friends were going and they invited me to an event. InterVarsity is always doing events on campus. They're doing outreach stuff. They're giving away pizza and talking with people and hanging out. And I think it was just through one of those scenarios.
Nice. Yeah.
And I met some really great people. Made some good friends there. Savina Kim was the campus, not the president, but like the campus,
like maybe the campus staff or campus staff.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
She was the campus staff, and she was just awesome. Nice. And she, I think, we'll get into this later too. But like, what I loved about InterVarsity was the way that they made like faith really accessible. And like the ideas of like, how do you pray? What does it mean to read your Bible? And how do you read it? Because it can be a confusing old piece of literature, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And it just was like very fun and free and not cultish and not weird and not like, you know what I mean?
That's always a win.
Yeah, it always is because, you feel like you get the picket sign and someone yelling at you. And this was just not that at all.
Yeah.
And being in New York City and trying to figure out how to do faith in New York City was fascinating because there's so many different religions there. There's so many different views. And one thing I noticed too is that when you live in New York City, being religious is not to your benefit. You know what I mean? Where like maybe if you live in the South or the Bible Belt, like it's advantageous to have faith. Yeah, because it's like a connection point. And in New York, it was like, right. In New York, it was not that. So it was a very interesting I don't know, like my faith journey growing in that time was just very unique because of all those things. Yeah. But InterVarsity, it was a great place that I made tons of friends, learned a lot about faith. And any memories that stick out? I mean, I remember distinctly like talking with Savina one time, and she was talking to me about a really simple thing that was about like a kind of a life lesson, but it was connected to faith. She talked about how she justifies her spending.
Okay.
Right. So she was like, here's how I think about money. There are certain things that I will never cut short on. Like I won't, my brain's not working today. She said, right. I'm trying to find the word. I've been like maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night. She's like, there are certain things that I will always spend money on and certain things that I won't. And I have to think about money as like something that God has allowed me to have. And when I spend it, I want to be able to have justification for the reason I spend the things that I do. So she's like, these are my three things, and one of them was like food. She's like, if I want to have a good steak one night, like I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
That she's like, that's my rule. She's like, 2, if I want to buy something that, is a little more expensive, I want to make sure it lasts for a long time so that I can feel like I'm not frivolously just adding more stuff to my life.
Yeah.
And she was like, 3 is I'll never short myself spending money on books. And nice. I was like, I love that. She's like, because I don't think there's anything that you could invest in like your mind that like there won't be a return. Every book is an investment in your mind and your the way you think, your processing chip. And that's the most, like the central piece of navigating life is how you think about stuff.
Yeah.
So I just remember being like, wow, I've never thought about how to spend money. I just was like, I want this thing, I'll get it, or I don't have the money, whatever. So that was a great memory, and it was just us chilling in the courtyard having like a sandwich with like a bunch of people. It's like the simple stuff.
Yes, love those casual but meaningful experiences, and little did we know in those days, maybe really how powerful and influential money would be in our lives. Growing up in the culture that we do, being surrounded by the things that we do. We're surrounded by materialism, and what does it mean to be well discipled about the way that we think about money and the way that influences us? That's huge. That's major. Big. Yeah, absolutely. Man, thank goodness for conversations about money, and especially in casual settings over a good sandwich. That's the way it's got to be, man. Gosh. Well, so Andy, on this podcast, we're celebrating God, and we're celebrating his partnership with InterVarsity alumni. We as students with InterVarsity, we would hear the vision statement: lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. And we're talking about a lot of that kind of world changer experience and what does it look like to partner with God and the things that He's called us into. And you've gotten to do that in some really unique ways in a very unique context. Being an artist, being a rapper, and being somebody that's connected with people that I would imagine being in New York and some of the music industry, the music world, as you've said, people that don't necessarily connect with faith elements in the same way that you do, and that's I would imagine that's flavored life for you in some very unique ways. And since our time is short, I want our audience to be able to get to know you, but I also want them to be able to hear about your most recent project. So I'm going to try to do like both of these at the same time and use for promotional use only as a framework for getting to know Andy and getting to know some of just the ways that you've been learning and growing and engaging with calling and purpose and things like that in your life recently. But since our time is short, it means I need to ask the most important questions first. So the most important question, I have to know, how influential for real was Eddie Murphy and the Nutty Professor to your development as a rapper?
Yeah. I mean, comedy has been, comedy like Ace Ventura, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Nutty Professor, like those movies from the 90s and 2000s, had a huge development in who I am as a person because it flavored my personality.
Yes.
And I think as a good artist is able to pull from all their experiences, interests, influences, and find ways to, inject it into their music. That becomes the how you make a fan.
Yeah.
We believe making a fan is just really making a friend. It's someone going, "Oh, you too," or I like that too. And so, it shaped my sense of humor and my personality a ton.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we try to do on my IG pages and in my music videos and in my songs is we let the personality and the interest shine through.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
You'll hear that sample from that Nutty Professor in Red Room Freestyle, which is off of For Promotional Use Only.
Yes, I was going to say when I was watching the video was my first exposure to Red Room Freestyle. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that Hercules line, and at the very start you have that Matt Foley line as well. I was like, dude, I think if our lives were just slightly different, me and Andy, we could be buddies because it's clear that we grew up being influenced by a lot of the same people.
That's right.
So
I don't meet too many people who like Chris Farley that I don't end up liking.
Yeah,
it's like if you like Chris Farley, we probably get each other.
Absolutely. If the time ever comes that you and I can sit down and just eat a really big cookie together, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, so I say that jokingly, but I was legitimately interested in that. But one of the lines that came up in a few different forms is this line: "Can God use crooked things to make straight paths?" And I know that there are places in some of the literature that you've included with the project that explains some of that. But I mean, first of all, like I would love to know not just why you're asking that question, but I'd love to know your answer to that question. Like, what are you learning about God using crooked things to make straight paths?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your question with a question. What do you think it means?
Oh man. I mean, I think the reality in my mind, the way that hits me is that we live in a world that is just imperfect. It's the way that it is. It is everything in this world is crooked in one way or another. But for some reason, God has chosen to use us broken people as part of His plan, as part of what He wants to do to accomplish His purposes. So it seems to me that the answer is it has to be yes. Otherwise, He wouldn't invite us into the game with Him.
Yeah. And we have answered the question. No,
you were like a good InterVarsity staff worker right there, man.
Nah, I mean, I do believe as artists, when we ask questions, the satisfaction comes through the listener coming to their conclusion, and for me, I don't like to explain the art too much because I feel like it can stop people from having their own interpretations and their own working through of that thing,
Yeah.
But I would agree with the things that you said. And I also think that, oh, look, the thumbs up. I would agree with the things you said. And I think, it's another thing to ask when you are the nature of the project for promotional use only was to take all types of things that I was influenced by, whether it be Christian or non-Christian or vehemently against Christians, and be able to repurpose all of these things in a really beautiful mosaic to create this piece of art for promotional use only. The name of that project is because of the nature of the samples that we used, which was, these are samples from all over the place that you normally wouldn't be able to get cleared. And so what if we put together a hodgepodge of all these things and, rhyme schemes from Dr. Dre that I liked as a kid and Eminem. Yeah. And you take a beat from Return of the Mac and you take, sample clips from, Isamu Noguchi and all these places and put it together and create something and look at it. And in the way that says like, wow, creativity is cyclical, we're all just pulling from our different influences and it creates a unique expression. But even that unique expression is evaluated and people pull from it. And it just, as humans, we pass on information and creativity and ideas and it all runs through us to create a really cool picture.
Yeah.
And, in that I was using a lot of things that people wouldn't necessarily deem as like good or holy or pure or Christian enough. And so asking that question was like, hey, but doesn't God always use, crooked sticks to make straight paths? I mean, I hope that the music I made was inspiring to somebody to look at God differently, or there's even a worship song on there called Forever that directly like worship God. And I used songs that weren't about God to make them about God on that song or on that record, And so I just wanted to pose the question because I think leading with questions is always just like a little more fun for me as an artist.
Yeah.
Because it invites conversation as opposed to demands. This is the way it is.
Yeah.
And more interesting to me for sure.
And I think it invites the listener to think critically or to think with a bigger perspective than they might have brought anyways, of like, oh, this is not something I would have expected to hear in this space. Is there still something worthwhile for me here that I should be paying attention to that I just wasn't anticipating?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
You get it.
Well, at least in this moment, Andy, but I've really appreciated some of the challenges that have come up as I've been listening to For Promotional Use Only. It's been a really awesome experience, and like something beyond just a just a musical experience of sitting back and listening. Like I've wanted to engage with the lyrics much more closely, and it has been like, it's been intellectual. I felt like invited into an artistic experience reading it. And it's been challenging in a really cool way to get to listen to these things. So I've appreciated what I assume has been very hard work on your part and your team's part putting those things together.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was definitely a labor of love because I mean, even the reason why it's named For Promotional Use Only is that's how people would get around having to clear samples. Is they say we're not selling this. This is just for promotion, and we haven't been able to monetize or make any money off of any of this art. This was meant to just purely be. That's why it's on YouTube as well. Yeah, it's just meant to be out in the world for people to observe, enjoy, listen to, think about. And we're going to try to find ways to make some versions of that available for DSPs, like Spotify and all that, because we're getting some samples cleared actually.
Sweet.
In a way that we didn't think we were going to. So like, all right, well, maybe this will come out one day, but until then it's on YouTube and all that.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. It's exciting that there's some people that want to come to the party with you on this. I hope that we get to see it put into a new format in some way in the future. But as it is right now, it's been really fun to engage with. Andy, can I ask you about your letter to Andre?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that song in particular, it's going to be tough for people to find because we were actually asked to remove that by the people who we sampled.
Okay.
They directly, come to find out, they work with Andre on his flute music.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
they were like, we don't clear this, take it off the internet, you know. So
Okay.
we're gonna put it back out under something else, you know, a different piece of music. But you can
Sure.
ask about that. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite songs on the project. And maybe it'll make more sense once it's out everywhere
Yes.
for people to hear it. But
Yeah.
let's talk about it.
Well, I'll stay relatively big picture because as I hear that, as I was reading through the lyrics that I was able to find for it, and the time that I did get to listen to it, it seems to me that there's this really interesting transition from, you know, asking questions of a role model, somebody that you've looked up to, and then becoming very introspective about like, oh, am I upset with you, or am I upset because of stuff that's happening in me? And questions that
Right.
I have, maybe anxiety or fears that I have right now. So the kind of the big picture question that I have for you is really about like staying grounded in your calling, especially when the people that you've looked to for inspiration exit the game or do something totally different,
Mm-hmm.
or when you are struggling to come up with your own inspiration. Like when inspiration runs dry and when role models aren't present anymore, how have you worked at staying grounded in your calling in those places?
Yeah. Well, you know, through life, you typically look for guides or prototypes to help you
Mm,
make sense of the scariness and unknownness of life, right? And I'm walking down this path. I don't know where it leads or how to navigate it. It's new. So you look up and you try to find examples that are in front of you or ahead
mm,
of you and you may be able to glean from. And you do that with everything. For me, with manhood, trying to understand who I am as a man,
mm.
growing up without a father, I'm like looking around for examples. I got to find something. Somebody's got to teach
Yeah,
me about money or women or relationships or friendship or what does it mean to find your passion? You know, all that stuff.
yeah,
Same thing in music. You know, I look at the people that I'm really inspired by, and you glean from them. And what's happened over and over in my life is usually the people I look up to or glean from will ultimately disappoint you in some way, you know,
yeah,
or
yeah,
shape or form. And uh, that's what I think created some of like the initial um, issues with faith for me
mm,
was guys that I really looked up to and helped shape the way I think about God and the Bible and all that stuff had
yeah,
massive failures, public failures, and end up turning out to
yes,
be people that you know had just big failures that disappointed because you're like, oh,
mm,
I wanted to continue to look up to you, and I'm really grateful that for the things I learned, but oh man, they went awry here, and I wonder now if they were wrong about this stuff. Maybe some of the other stuff I learned from them was wrong too,
yeah,
right? You start to kind of
yeah,
question things like, oh, maybe I was seeing this whole thing wrong.
absolutely,
So, and that is not an indictment. I think people like humans are going to human. They're going to fail.
yes,
They're going to make mistakes, and I
yes,
think to put people on too high of a pedestal is ultimately to set yourself up for failure.
mm,
Because when you, at the end of the day, you see just all humans are products of grace, really, just like all faulty, frail, make mistakes.
yeah,
And I think really what defines people is not that they don't make mistakes; it's when they do, how they react to them.
mm,
You know, whether they apologize for it and own it, which is I just wish what we would all do. It actually is makes moving forward so much more beneficial
yeah,
than denying and hiding the whole way. But I won't. I digress a little bit. I won't get into that. But musically, that was the case with this Andre song. So the song is called "I
mm,
Swear I Want to Like This Andre" album, based off of the name of his first song on his flute album, which is "I Swear I Wanted to Make a Rap Album, but this is where the wind blew me," literally. And in that song is my basically my observation and open criticism of my favorite rapper,
mm,
uh, you know, not rapping anymore. Going, I'm going to make a
yeah,
flute album, and it sounds like I'm dissing him or like being hypercritical of him. But what the song ends up resolving into is actually you've always been a person that's gone left of center and done something different, Andre, and you doing
Yeah.
this is actually right in line with who you've always been.
Right.
And what I'm really saying is I'm afraid that I won't know when it's time to walk away from rap, because sometimes I sense I'm getting older the way that you felt like you were getting older and couldn't contribute anymore. And when do you stop? And maybe he has more courage than I do by saying, you know what, I'm going to do something else. And even if people are going to make fun of me for it or laugh at me, like, this is really me being true to myself. And I want that level of courage. And so that's why the song, it sounds like it's outward, but it ends up turning back into me and making introspective.
Yes.
And I think that's the same thing that happens, like even when I was talking about before, is when you see people fail and you're hurt by it, do you just rail on them? How could you? Or do you say, man, maybe I should pay attention so that that doesn't happen to me? Like, where's the pitfalls here? What's the lesson here? Because they're just humans, they're making mistakes. That's normal.
Yeah.
How do I learn from that and not criticize them or judge them,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it seems to me, another pitfall that's in there is how often can we get wrapped up in our view of what our calling looks like. This is the specific application of my calling, of the thing that I'm good at, and anything outside of this is to divert from the way that God has made me or the things that He's invited me to do. It'd be me like selling out or giving up. And to say, like, man, what if our calling is actually, if there's a lot more space than that to be able to evolve and adapt and to change as needed? And that, like, what does it mean to pay attention to the seasons of our lives? And, what if someday Andy Mineo is no longer making rap music because he has said, like, man, the next step of my life is something different. And what does that look like to be able to hold loosely what it means to be called into something? I mean, especially as we think about, as followers of Jesus, the calling that we have in our lives of submitting ourselves to Him in the ways that He directs us. And maybe that makes sense sometimes, and other times it doesn't. And so, yeah, I think there's also an invitation in there to hold loosely, like, what does it mean to be called into something? And to be prepared to go 100% when we're in a space, and when it's time to take the next step. Okay, I'll take the next step with grace. I'll learn the new thing, and I'll go 100% in that space as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and you're touching on a lot of the stuff that I kind of circle around in that song. So hopefully people get to hear it at some point. It is a record I'm really proud of the writing.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll be available for everybody, here pretty soon with a video and that whole nine. Sorry.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm excited to see how things continue to develop with the project. Man, Andy, kind of circling back to some of our original conversation about InterVarsity. I know that you've had many influences in your life, many things that have helped shape and develop you. And InterVarsity is one of those. As you think about the ways that you are participating in the world around you, the ways that you are engaging with God and His calling, and the things that He's inviting you to do as you rap, as you are a husband and a father, and all of the different elements of who you are there ways that you see important threads from InterVarsity and the ways that you were being formed on campus to the ways that you're engaging with the world around you now? Can you share 100%. Some of the things that you see?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, things that I learned from InterVarsity that I regularly apply to my life today. I would say stuff like the basic spiritual disciplines, like a basic knowledge of the spiritual disciplines, which is prayer, fasting, scripture reading, community, right? Like, these are things that are part of my life regularly, and the foundations of those was really cemented at my time with InterVarsity in college. I didn't understand how to read the Bible that well. I can open a book and just read it, but how to break it down, how to maybe read it a couple times, read it in a few translations, really observe before you jump to application, and just being like, time to apply this to my life. And I actually don't even really know what it says, so my application to this stuff can be kind of nuts, right? Or just whatever I want it to be.
Yeah.
I mean, just going through those weekend trips to like Basilea and things like that, and just spending like a weekend with friends, hanging out, doing cool things, and then like having a little lesson taught by like Greg Howe on how to read the Bible. And then I'm thinking it's boring. I was like, I don't want to read this again. And I read it a second time. I'm like, wait a second, I didn't see that before. Read it a third time. This is crazy. Read it a fourth time. Your mind's blown. So in how I read, how I pray, how I do community, how I do evangelism, which is essentially just inviting other people into faith experiences with you, right? Man, they made it so easy, so simple. InterVarsity awesome. Was like, hey, we're doing an event. Invite people out. And I was like, how do you do that? Go up and talk to them. You know, have interesting points of conversation and see if they're, you know. I mean, I think it made faith very like pragmatic for me in a way. Like the things that can be confusing and difficult, it's like just talk to somebody and invite them. And if they don't want to come, respect that and be like, that's great. You know,
yeah.
I think one of the things that I learned too is how to ask people for stuff.
Okay.
Like a lot of InterVarsity leaders have to fundraise like their own money, right?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with Savina and her being like, listen, when I ask people if they want to donate to InterVarsity, I mean, obviously talking about money can be a very like difficult and awkward thing for people. She took all the awkwardness out of it. And I just love that she did that because that's applicable for me in business.
Yeah.
You know, in dealing with record contracts and talking with people about negotiating prices for a guy who's making a beat for me. You know, hey, that's outside of our budget. Would you be able to work with this? And if not, that's okay. Like just being very clear in how to ask and not being afraid of money talks. She told me, she's like, I go out, I ask someone if I can give 15 minutes of their time because I don't want to eat up. I know how valuable time is. I show them what we're doing at InterVarsity. I show them how contributions could go directly towards doing things. I make a direct ask and then I shut my mouth. And she goes, I take a sip.
There you go.
So would you want to partner with us in being able to donate this quarter?
Man,
I learned the value of asking and silence. That sometimes asking and continuing to talk can actually be out of your own awkwardness of not wanting to really make someone feel uncomfortable. I have to wrestle with that question of do they want to be generous or give or do this right now? It's like less is more, you know? And so I learned so much stuff that finds its way into making art, living my life, having friendships, connecting with people, doing business. I mean, truly, it's shaped almost everything.
That's really fantastic to hear because I become more and more convinced that the experiences that we had as students on campus are not just, they certainly are, they are not just for our spiritual formation there. They're for our spiritual formation long after. They're training us in a way of following Jesus that is applicable for our whole lives, not something that just works on campus. But the skills that we're learning as students with InterVarsity, they have real marketable value in the work that you do afterwards. It's unbelievable. The resume building that you are doing as a student, that you can take and use in your place of employment, that you can use in your family, in your church, all of these different places. It's unbelievable.
Massive. The leadership development in InterVarsity is probably the most underrated thing. Like if people think that you're going there just like to learn about God, and you are, but you're learning how to like exist in the world as a person and as a person of faith, how to like have really practical tools, how to navigate life. It's absolutely unbelievable. The leadership stuff I learned there, I use in my business all the time. So when they say like like people renewed, campuses transformed, like world changes and leaders developed, that's real.
Yeah.
All the stuff from I learned from InterVarsity is showing up today as a person who's making art that's touching millions of people.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love hearing that. And knowing that's the case, Andy, and I know that you're a guy, you are still in process. You are still learning to navigate this world. But with where you stand right now, knowing that there are other alumni like you out there who are discerning, what does it look like for me to partner with God in his world changing work? Is there like one piece of encouragement or advice that you would give to your fellow alumni as they right along with you continue to explore what it looks like to do those things with God?
So let me clarify that question. If I was talking to other alumni, what would be a word of encouragement to them to continue to live out kind of what they've learned at InterVarsity?
Or just like, big picture, thinking about alumni who are in process figuring out what does it look like me to partner on purpose with God and the things that he's doing in the world, which isn't always an easy thing to figure out. Sometimes we can get kind of frustrated. We can feel let down by the people we've looked up to. We might not feel like we have the right skills that will help us do that. But what's a word of encouragement that you would give to other alumni who are figuring out what it looks like to navigate this world?
Yeah. Well, man, I think if I'm hearing your question correctly, I think it's like, as you step out into the world, you have a limited amount of time, and we don't know how much that is, to exist here, to experience things, to enjoy stuff. And you receive all this goodness like sunlight, food, experiences, love. And you also have an opportunity to be a conveyor for that and to communicate that and share that with other people.
Yeah.
And in the limited time that we have, are we able to receive and give love wholeheartedly? I think that's one of our big purposes for being here. When you don't know where to go or what to do next, or things feel confusing, what has always been an anchor for me is like, well, let me drill down on what has always been true. Right. And I was like, I remember this was always true for me. So, for example, sometimes it feels like spiritually, it can be a very big question mark in my life to go, what am I supposed to do right now, God? Sometimes I want like the heavens to crack open and for him to speak very clearly about like, go here, do this. But I'm like, okay, and there's so much Bible, there's so many passages, like, what do I use? I'm like, well, what's one that I know is true? And an anchor for me is love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Do unto others as you had done to yourself, right? I'm like, oh, that's a starter kit principle for me to just evaluate everything that's happened in my life. Am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think those are the things that can help anchor you when things get confusing, is make it really simple and find the stuff that's always been true. Whenever I get real caught up on faith stuff and things that make me cynical towards God or faith or Jesus, I have to be like, well, what made me like Jesus in the first place? And I just go back to those. I was like, oh man, you know what it was? It was always that he was flipping things on its head. You think one way and then he flips it and shows you it's really like this. He's like, he gets slapped in the face and then instead of hitting him back, he says, turn the other cheek. When he was getting crucified and killed, he didn't send down angels to smash everybody. He prayed for them. He's doing the opposite, which I was like, man, that's so dope. Jesus was always flipping things on its head. And that's what made me fall in love with him and be like, oh, he's different.
Yeah.
And so I try to return to those things. I think like if InterVarsity was a huge influence for you, it's like maybe sometimes our work isn't going out there and just doing like full-time ministry. It's working a regular job that allows us to earn money and income and then being able to support others that are doing the work. We all play a part in this network of trying to be light to the world. And no part is too big or too small. It's just everyone's being led by the gifts that they have, the interests that they have, and how they spend it and use it. I think collectively creates, everyone putting a little light up creates a big glow,
Yeah.
And I hope that makes sense. But
yeah, absolutely. I love
stuff that I lean into when I feel lost or confused.
Yeah. Return to what's always been true. Go back to the basics and start again from there. I love that. Andy, how can your alumni be supporting you both in prayer and how can they support you by engaging with the art that you're making? Give us just a quick rundown of how people can keep supporting you.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the way that people can support me is through prayer. It's, we're trying to make really like potent art and stuff that is like has high utility, whether that be just like a great song to work out to that keeps you motivated, or a deeply spiritual song that makes you feel like you want to explicitly worship God. I mean, my music spans the gamut there.
Yes.
Praying that we continue to stay focused on the things that matter the most. I mean, it's really easy to get sidetracked and make a career like this about yourself.
Yeah.
And just praying for that like servant mind is like, we want the products that we make to serve people and encourage them and inspire them. And that we want to stay aligned. Our character wants to stay good so that we don't ever have to protect our reputation, and I think we do a good job, but that's, you never let your guard down in that area. It's a very like public facing thing. And we want to represent Jesus well. Yeah. The second thing is like when you just real simple stuff, it's like following on socials and liking and commenting and sharing. That stuff just helps what they call the algorithm. It's like boost posts and things like that up so more people can see it, engage with the stuff. Very simple stuff like that. Hey, this is a really good song or music video or funny clip that Andy posted. Share it with 10 people. This is my favorite guy. You should check him out. Go ahead and stream on platforms wherever you listen to music, and that always helps. So
nice.
Those are a couple simple ways.
Sweet. That's great. We'll throw those in the show notes so people can read and follow and help you out in those ways. Andy, thank you so much for giving some of your time today. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, and time is like the one resource that can't be renewed for sure. I know that for sure.
That's right.
And so I very much appreciate that you would invest time in other alumni like you, in me getting to hang out. It's been super fun getting to hang out with you. And thanks for investing in this podcast from the beginning, letting us use Crazy. That's been so much fun to get to have that. And I'm just really grateful for you and for the work that you're doing, for the integrity that you're doing it with. And it's been a lot of fun to get to hear a little bit more about your story and get to know you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
No, thanks for having me. And InterVarsity has affected and changed my life in so many ways. If there's ever times or opportunities I can give back, I love to, because it really has shaped so much of who I am as a man. So I'm grateful. And I would say anybody out there that's, going to college, and, if there's something on your campus like that, go check it out, because you might make some lifelong friends and you might learn something that you can take with you for the rest of the journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, thanks a lot, Andy. I'm grateful for you. I look forward to eating that big cookie together someday.
Come on, man. Let's get it.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. Check the show notes for more information about today's guest and for ways that you could be praying for your fellow alum. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, take just a moment to share the episode with them, and then be sure to leave us a rating and a review as well. Now go change that world, alumni. Thanks for listening to InterVarsity World Changers. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Santera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Mineo.